The courtroom was packed, the air thick with tension as the 10-year-old boy was led to the defense table. He looked small in his oversized chair, his feet dangling just above the floor, but his face held no fear, only a smug grin that sent chills through the room. When the prosecutor began describing the tragic end of 3 lives in that quiet Ohio apartment, he whispered to his lawyer and chuckled softly, as if the whole thing was a game. He believed his young age made him untouchable, or that the system couldn't hold a child accountable, but deep down, his calm arrogance hid a chilling calculation, and justice was already closing in. He just didn't know the judge was about to rewrite the rules forever. Stories like this remind us that justice always finds its way. If you believe in accountability, subscribe now and tell us what you think below. This is how it all began. In a modest Dayton neighborhood where families lived side by side, trusting one another like old friends. The boy, let's call him Alex for the sake of this story, had grown up playing in those same streets, shooting hoops with the kids next door. But beneath his boyish exterior simmered something darker, a curiosity that twisted into something dangerous. On that fateful afternoon, he slipped into the Alvarez home with a plan he thought was foolproof, convinced no one would ever suspect a kid like him. Little did he know, the hallway camera had captured every step, and the family's heartbreak was just the start of a chain that would lead straight to him. As the sun set that day, 3 lives were forever changed, and the boy's casual return home to play video games would soon unravel everything. In the quiet suburbs of Dayton, Ohio, where rows of brick duplexes lined streets that felt safe and familiar, young Alex had always blended in like any other kid. At 10 years old, he was the boy next door. Skinny, on with a mop of unruly hair and a backpack slung over one shoulder. But on that crisp autumn afternoon in 2018, something shifted in the air, a subtle wrongness that no one noticed until it was too late. The Alvarez family, living just 2 doors down, had welcomed him into their home countless times. Maria, the hard-working single mom, often shared snacks with him after school. Her son, Diego, a lanky 15-year-old with dreams of flying planes. I had even taught Alex how to dribble a basketball in the driveway. And Elena, Maria's cousin from Texas, was there for a short visit, filling the house with laughter and stories from back home. They were a close-knit group, the kind that made the neighborhood feel like an extended family. But trust can be a fragile thing, and Alex had been nursing grievances that simmered beneath his polite smiles. Small slights from Diego that he twisted into something bigger in his mind. As the clock ticked toward 4 o'clock, he knocked on their door with a plan he believed was clever, one that would let him walk away unscathed. The door opened, and in that moment, the ordinary day turned into a nightmare none of them could have imagined. Inside the Alvarez home, the atmosphere was warm and unassuming, the scent of fresh coffee lingering from Maria's afternoon break. She was in the kitchen, chatting with Elena about family recipes, while Diego lounged in the living room, scrolling through his phone. Alex entered with a casual hello, his backpack heavy with a secret he had taken from his mother's drawer, a small revolver he thought no one would miss. He had checked it earlier, fascinated by its weight, convinced that his age would shield him from any real consequences. The conversation started light, about school and games, but tension built like a storm cloud. Words were exchanged, perhaps a teasing remark from Diego that hit too close to home. And Alex's face hardened. In a flash of decision, he pulled out the weapon, his hand steady in a way that belied his youth. The first shot rang out, muffled by the walls, catching Maria off guard as she turned from the counter. Panic spread, but it was quick and contained. Elena tried to reach for her phone. Diego lunged to protect his mom, but Alex moved with a chilling precision, firing again and again. The pops echoed briefly, mistaken by distant neighbors for nothing more than firecrackers. But within minutes, the house fell silent. The 3 victims slumped where they had stood. Their lives ended in an act that seemed both impulsive and eerily calculated. Alex stood there for a moment, heart racing not with regret, but with a strange thrill, before zipping up his backpack and slipping out the door as if nothing had happened. Back at his own house, Alex acted like it was just another day. He grabbed a snack from the fridge, fired up his video game console, and lost himself in digital worlds where actions had no real repercussions. His mother, busy with her own routines, didn't notice anything amiss. His calm demeanor was his greatest disguise. Meanwhile, across the street, the Alvarez home remained quiet, the front door slightly ajar, a detail that would later haunt investigators. It wasn't until evening, when a worried friend stopped by and found the scene, that the alarm was raised. Police sirens pierced the night, lights flashing against the duplexes as officers cordoned off the area. The discovery was heartbreaking. Maria in the kitchen, her coffee mug shattered on the floor. Diego in the hallway, his phone still clutched in his hand. Elena near the couch, her visit cut tragically short. Forensic teams arrived, noting the lack of forced entry, the close-range nature of the wounds, and the absence of any theft. This wasn't a random break-in. It was personal, deliberate. Neighbors gathered on sidewalks, whispering in shock, unable to fathom how such darkness had invaded their peaceful corner of the world. One resident recalled seeing Alex walking home that afternoon, looking as normal as ever, which only deepened the growing sense of betrayal. As the investigation kicked off that night, detectives pieced together the timeline with a growing sense of unease. Surveillance footage from the apartment complex's hallway camera became the first crucial break, a grainy clip showing a small figure entering the Alvarez door at 4:03 p.m. and leaving 12 minutes later, backpack in tow. The boy's distinctive cartoon patch on the strap matched Alex's exactly, a detail his own mother confirmed under questioning. When officers knocked on his door, he met them with wide-eyed innocence, claiming he'd been gaming all afternoon. But his story crumbled quickly. Phone data placed him at the scene, and a partial shoe print in the hallway grout matched his sneakers. In the interrogation room, surrounded by gentle-voiced detectives offering juice and reassurances, Alex shrugged off the accusations. "Prove it," he said with a hint of defiance, his small frame slouched in the chair. There were no tears, no pleas for his mom, just a detached curiosity about what would happen next. Investigators noted his steady pulse, and the way he asked about the camera footage as if it were a puzzle to solve. It was unsettling, this lack of emotion in someone so young, and it fueled whispers among the team that this wasn't a childish mistake, but something more calculated. The arrogance peaked during those early hours as Alex whispered to his assigned lawyer in the holding area, "They can't lock up a kid like me." He believed the system was built to protect children, that his age was an unbreakable shield. But the evidence was mounting. Gunshot residue on his sleeves traced back to the revolver hidden in a dumpster nearby, its barrel still warm from use. Prosecutors reviewed the digital trail too, a search history on his tablet revealing queries like how old for jail and messages to a friend hinting at getting away with something big. The community reeled, families hugging their own children tighter, questioning how a boy they all knew could harbor such intent. 3 lives gone in an instant, and yet Alex showed no remorse, no flicker of understanding for the pain he'd caused. It was this untouchable attitude that enraged those following the case, turning public sentiment from sympathy to demands for accountability. As dawn broke over Dayton, the case was already making headlines, with legal experts debating the rare possibility of trying someone so young as an adult. In the days that followed, the courtroom became the stage for Alex's smirk to face its first real test. He led in by bailiffs, he sat at the defense table, legs swinging, his expression one of bored amusement rather than fear. The judge, a seasoned figure known for fairness, entered to a hushed room, but Alex leaned back and muttered something that drew a sharp glance from his attorney. Outside, the victims' extended families gathered, holding photos of Maria, Diego, and Elena, their faces etched with grief and quiet rage. But the preliminary hearing laid out the charges: 3 counts of aggravated harm leading to death, a phrasing that captured the methodical nature without dwelling on the brutality. Prosecutors alleged premeditation, pointing to the weapons theft and the calm execution. Alex's response? A soft chuckle when the word murder was mentioned, as if it were a joke from one of his games. This arrogance didn't sit well with the gallery, where gasps rippled like waves. But beneath it all, the judge watched carefully, noting the boy's demeanor, already pondering a historic decision that could change everything. The promise of justice began to stir in that packed courtroom as whispers spread about the motion to transfer Alex to adult court, a move unprecedented for someone his age in Ohio. He thought he was untouchable, protected by youth and the law's leniency. But the surveillance stills projected on the screen told a different story. A small shadow entering with purpose, leaving with none. Families wept silently, clinging to memories of laughter and shared meals, while Alex doodled on a notepad, oblivious to the weight. It was a stark contrast, the innocence of childhood clashing with acts that demanded reckoning. As the hearing adjourned, the judge's pen tapped thoughtfully, foreshadowing a ruling that would test the boundaries of mercy and accountability. The smirk lingered on Alex's face, but for those watching, it was a symbol of something broken, something that justice might finally address. And in the quiet aftermath, as reporters swarmed the steps, one question hung in the air: how far would the system go to ensure that age didn't excuse the inexcusable? The weight of that question lingered like a shadow over the Dayton courthouse steps, where families and reporters alike buzzed with a mix of outrage and disbelief. But to understand the depth of the tragedy, one had to look back at the lives that had been so abruptly stolen, the Alvarez family, whose warmth had once brightened that unassuming neighborhood. Maria Alvarez was the heart of it all, a 38-year-old woman who juggled 2 jobs at a local diner and a warehouse, always with a smile that lit up the room. She had come to Ohio from Mexico as a young adult, building a life for her son Diego through sheer determination, saving every penny for his future. Neighbors remembered her as the one who organized block parties, sharing homemade tamales and stories that made everyone feel like family. Elena, her cousin from Texas, had arrived just days before, her visit a rare chance to reconnect over coffee and old photo albums. At 42, Elena was a schoolteacher back home, known for her gentle patience with children, and she had brought gifts for Diego, a model airplane kit to fuel his dreams of becoming a pilot. Their home was a cozy haven, filled with the scent of spices and the sound of laughter, a place where trust came easily and doors were often left unlocked. It was this very openness that made the betrayal so profound, turning a sanctuary into a scene of irreversible loss. Diego, at 15, was the spark of energy in the household, a teenager with big aspirations and a kind heart. He spent his afternoons practicing layups in the driveway, often inviting younger kids like Alex to join in, just teaching them tricks with a patience that belied his age. School friends described him as the guy who stood up for the underdog, always quick with a joke or a helping hand. He dreamed of joining the Air Force, poring over aviation books late into the night, his walls plastered with posters of jets soaring through the clouds. Maria had texted a coworker that morning, "It's going to be a good day." Her words a poignant echo of the normalcy that shattered by afternoon. Elena, too, had been excited, planning a birthday surprise for Diego that never came to pass. The 3 of them had shared a lunch of sandwiches and fruit, talking about weekend plans, oblivious to the storm brewing just doors away. In the tight-knit community, where kids roamed freely and parents watched out for one another, the Alvarezes represented stability amid life's challenges. Maria's strength in raising Diego alone after his father left years earlier inspired those around her, making her loss feel like a wound to the entire neighborhood. Yet, beneath the surface of this peaceful existence, small tensions had simmered unnoticed. Alex had been a frequent visitor, drawn to the Alvarez home perhaps by the warmth he lacked in his own. His single mother worked long hours, leaving him to his devices, and he often wandered over, accepted without question. Diego had teased him lightly once or twice, harmless sibling-like banter about video games or basketball skills, but Alex internalized it deeply, letting resentment fester in silence. Neighbors later reflected on how he seemed like any other child, polite and unassuming. Yet there were fleeting moments of odd detachment, like when he stared too long at passing cars or asked probing questions about rules and consequences. The duplexes in that part of Dayton were modest, with shared yards where children played tag and families barbecued on weekends. It was the kind of place where tragedies like this weren't supposed to happen, where trust was the unspoken bond. Maria had even baked cookies for Alex's birthday the previous year, a gesture that now felt like a cruel irony. As the sun dipped low that afternoon, the Alvarez home stood as a testament to everyday joy, unaware that a knock at the door would unravel it all. The empathy for the victims swelled in the community as details emerged, painting a picture of lives full of promise, cut short. Maria's co-workers set up a memorial fund, sharing stories of her unwavering optimism, how she mentored younger staff and always had a listening ear. Diego's school held a vigil, his classmates leaving notes and model planes at his locker, remembering his infectious enthusiasm for life. Elena's family in Texas mourned from afar, on her students back home drawing pictures in her honor, touched by her dedication to education. It was this human side, the dreams deferred, the laughter silenced, that fueled the public's growing rage toward Alex's perceived arrogance. How could someone so young, who had been welcomed into their circle, repay kindness with such finality? The neighborhood transformed overnight, from a place of open doors to one of locked gates and wary glances. Parents held their children closer, whispering about the fragility of trust, while media outlets replayed sanitized accounts of the event, focusing on the family's resilience amid heartbreak. As investigators delved deeper, the victims' stories became the emotional anchor of the case, humanizing the abstract horror. Maria's last text message was read in early hearings, a simple note of hope that contrasted sharply with the calculated act that followed. Diego's unfinished college application sat on his desk, and a reminder of potential loss. Elena's suitcase, still packed with souvenirs from her trip, symbolized a journey ended too soon. The community's grief manifested in small ways: flowers piled at the duplex steps, candles flickering in windows, and support groups forming for those affected. It was impossible not to feel the weight of their absence, the void left in a neighborhood that had prided itself on togetherness. Alex, meanwhile, remained detached in custody, his untouchable facade intact, but the tide of empathy for the Alvarezes was turning public opinion, demanding that justice transcend age. This outpouring of sorrow only heightened the moral tension as the legal process churned forward. Families of the victims attended every court appearance, their presence a quiet testament to love and loss, refusing to let the story be reduced to statistics. In interviews, Maria's sister spoke of her unbreakable spirit, urging others to remember the good rather than the darkness. Diego's coach recalled his determination on the court, a metaphor for the fight now being waged in the courtroom. Elena's father, voice steady despite his pain, emphasized forgiveness's limits when trust is so profoundly broken. These narratives wove into the fabric of the case, building a case not just on evidence, but on the irreplaceable value of the lives taken. The rage simmered, directed at the boys' apparent lack of remorse, yet it was tempered by a collective hope for accountability. Would you, as a viewer, find room for mercy in such a story, or does the depth of the loss demand something more? The question echoed in online discussions where debates raged about youth and responsibility. As the case progressed, these personal stories kept the focus on the human cost, ensuring that the victims weren't forgotten amid the legal drama. The neighborhood, forever changed, began to heal through shared memories, but the path to justice felt long and fraught. In the end, as the preliminary motions wrapped, the family's quiet dignity stood in stark contrast to Alex's lingering smirk, a visual that haunted those who witnessed it. The door to the Alvarez home remained closed, a silent sentinel to what had been lost, while the world outside grappled with the echoes of their absence. As the family's stories faded into the quiet hum of courtroom anticipation, the focus shifted to that fateful afternoon, reconstructing the events with a precision that left no room for doubt. It was a day like any other in the Dayton suburbs, the kind where sunlight filtered through autumn leaves and the air carried the faint chill of approaching evening. Alex, with his backpack slung casually over his shoulder, had approached the Alvarez door around 4 p.m., knocking with the familiarity of a neighbor. Inside, Maria was tidying the kitchen, Elena folding laundry in the living room, and then Diego grabbing a drink from the fridge. They welcomed him in without hesitation, perhaps offering a snack or asking about his day at school. But hidden in that backpack was something out of place. A small revolver Alex had quietly taken from his mother's bedroom drawer, believing it was safely stored away. He had handled it before, curious about its mechanics, convinced that no one would connect it back to him. The conversation started innocently enough. A light chatter about games and homework, but underlying tensions simmered, small grudges Alex had harbored now bubbling to the surface in his young mind. In those tense moments, the ordinary turned extraordinary, as Alex's curiosity twisted into a decisive act that changed everything. He reached into his backpack, pulling out the revolver with hands that didn't tremble, his face set in a determination that seemed beyond his years. The first sharp report echoed through the kitchen, catching Maria by surprise as she turned from the sink, her expression one of confusion in her final seconds. Chaos erupted briefly. Elena called out in alarm, rushing toward the sound, while Diego moved instinctively to shield his mother. But Alex was methodical, turning the weapon with a calm that forensic experts would later describe as controlled, not frantic. Another report followed, then a third, each one deliberate and close range, leaving powder marks that spoke of proximity and intent. So the house, once filled with warmth, fell into an unnatural silence, the victims collapsing where they stood. Maria near the counter, Diego in the narrow hallway, Elena by the couch. There was no sign of a struggle, no overturned furniture or desperate pleas evident in the scene. Just a sequence of actions that unfolded in under 10 minutes, efficient in its finality. Neighbors nearby heard the muffled pops, dismissing them as distant fireworks or a car backfiring, the sounds blending into the background noise of a typical afternoon. No one glanced toward the duplex, no alarms were raised. The suburb's peace masked the unfolding tragedy. Alex, meanwhile, paused only briefly, surveying the room with a detachment that chilled investigators when they later pieced it together. He zipped up his backpack, now lighter without the revolver he'd stashed elsewhere, and slipped out the front door, closing it softly behind him. And the hallway surveillance camera captured it all. A small figure entering with purpose at 4:03 p.m., then exiting at 4:15 p.m., his stride unhurried, expression blank. Back home, he washed his hands, grabbed a controller, and logged into his favorite online game at exactly 5:02 p.m., immersing himself in virtual adventures as if the real world hadn't just shifted on its axis. His mother, arriving later, noticed nothing amiss. His calm routine, the perfect cover. Forensic teams, on arriving hours later after a concerned friend's discovery, worked methodically to map the scene, their findings painting a picture of calculation rather than impulse. The revolver, recovered from a nearby dumpster, matched the residue patterns on the victim's clothing, with stippling indicating shots fired from mere feet away. Ballistics confirmed the weapon's origin, traced back to Alex's home through registration records. There was no evidence of robbery. Wallets untouched, valuables in place, ruling out greed as a motive. Instead, the layout suggested a planned sequence, starting in the kitchen, moving to the hallway, ending in the living room, each step deliberate without the chaos of panic. The medical examiner's report emphasized control, noting how the wounds showed precision, not wild flailing. This was not a moment of fear, the examiner would testify, but one of choice. Digital timestamps from the camera aligned perfectly, leaving no gaps for alibis, while trace evidence like a faint shoe print in the hallway grout linked directly to Alex's sneakers. The reconstruction fueled a mini-climax in the investigation as detectives connected the dots with growing certainty. Alex's digital footprint added layers, searches on his device about age and consequences, hinting at forethought. Why target the Alvarezes? Whispers of minor bullying from Diego surfaced, but school records showed no formal complaints. She's suggesting Alex's resentment was self-amplified, perhaps an experiment in pushing boundaries. The community grappled with the visuals: a home frozen in time, coffee still warm in a mug, a half-folded shirt on the couch, lives interrupted mid-breath. Rage built among those following the case, directed at the boys' apparent ease in resuming normalcy, playing games while families shattered. It was a stark reminder of how quickly innocence could veil something darker, turning a neighborly visit into an irreversible end. As details leaked to the media, the afternoon's events became a point of heated discussion. How could such composure exist in one so young? Online forums buzzed with questions. Was it a cry for help or something colder? The family's grief intensified, Maria's sister recounting how she had sensed nothing wrong in a morning call. Diego's friends shared memories of his protective nature, now tragically unfulfilled. And Elena's loved ones in Texas mourned the visit that became eternal. This reconstruction wasn't just about facts. It evoked empathy, painting the victims as vibrant souls whose final moments deserved justice. The legal team prepared to present it all, knowing it would test the boundaries of juvenile accountability. Would you believe a child capable of such planning, or does youth demand a different lens? The question lingered, sparking debates that mirrored the case's moral core. As evidence mounted, the afternoon's shadow loomed larger, a pivotal chapter that shifted curiosity to demands for proof. The neighborhood, scarred but resilient, held vigils, candles flickering against the dusk, honoring lives taken too soon. The faint scent of spent powder hung in the air, longer than any echo of childhood laughter ever could, a lingering reminder that some acts redefine everything. The faint scent of spent powder had barely dissipated when the investigation truly ignited, pulling detectives into a web of clues that pointed unerringly toward the unlikeliest suspect. In the hours following the heartbreaking discovery at the Alvarez home, law enforcement treated the case with the urgency it demanded, canvassing the neighborhood for any whisper of unusual activity. They started with routine interviews, knocking on doors and speaking to residents who had heard those muffled sounds but thought little of them. Alex, the boy from 2 doors down, was approached initially as a potential witness. After all, he had played with Diego and was known to drop by. Officers sat with him in his living room, voices gentle and reassuring, offering him a soda as they asked about his afternoon. He met their eyes steadily, claiming he had been home the whole time, glued to his video games without stepping outside. His story sounded plausible at first, delivered with the wide-eyed innocence of a child recounting a boring day. But beneath that calm exterior, there was a flicker of something off, a detachment that made one detective pause and note it in his report. The neighborhood, still reeling from the shock, provided scattered accounts. Someone mentioned seeing a kid with a backpack, but details blurred in the evening light. Alex's mother backed his alibi without hesitation, her voice firm as she described coming home to find him exactly where he said, controller in hand and snacks scattered around. As she painted a picture of normalcy, emphasizing how quiet and well-behaved he usually was, the kind of kid who kept to himself but never caused trouble. Detectives nodded politely, jotting notes, but behind the scenes they were already pulling strings, subpoenaing phone records and geolocation data that could confirm or shatter the timeline. When the results came back, the contradiction was stark. Alex's device pinged near the Alvarez home right around 4 p.m., placing him at the scene with undeniable precision. His mother's face paled when confronted with the evidence. She stammered, admitting she might have misremembered the exact times, her protective instincts clashing with the cold facts. This crack in the story shifted the tone. Alex was no longer just a witness, but a person of interest, his casual claims now under scrutiny. The investigators, seasoned in handling sensitive cases involving youth, proceeded carefully, ensuring protocols were followed to protect everyone involved. Yet the discrepancy fueled a quiet determination among the team as they prepared to dig deeper into the boy's movements. Physical evidence began to weave a tighter net, starting with something as ordinary as a pair of sneakers. Forensics had lifted a partial print from the tile grout in the Alvarez hallway, faint but distinct, marked by what appeared to be traces of disturbance from the scene. When officers examined Alex's shoes, seized during a warranted search of his home, the tread pattern matched perfectly, right down to a unique wear mark on the left sole from hours of pavement play. It wasn't a smoking gun on its own, but combined with the timeline, it painted a picture of presence that Alex couldn't easily dismiss. He was brought in for a more formal talk at the station, seated in a room designed to feel less intimidating, with posters on the walls and a box of crayons nearby. Detectives kept their questions light at first, circling back to his alibi, but Alex stuck to his script, insisting he hadn't left the house. His small hands fidgeted only slightly, more out of boredom than nerves, as if the whole process was an unwelcome interruption to his day. The team noted his steady gaze, the way he answered without the hesitation one might expect from a child caught in a fib. Confrontation came in waves, building like a tide that eroded his confidence bit by bit. Detectives slid a still image from the hallway surveillance across the table, the grainy photo showing a figure matching his build entering the Alvarez door. Alex stared at it for a long moment, his expression blank, before shrugging with a casualness that unsettled the room. "That's not me," he said simply, pushing the photo back as if it were a puzzle he had no interest in solving. There was no outburst, so no wide-eyed denial, just a flat dismissal that hinted at an inner assurance he could talk his way out. But the forensics lab was working overtime, enhancing the footage frame by frame. What emerged was damning, a clear view of a distinctive cartoon patch on the backpack strap, the same one Alex's mother identified as his favorite, sewn on after a school trip. It was a small detail, but in investigations like this, small details often unlock the truth. Alex's response? Another shrug, and followed by a request for a snack, his demeanor shifting from cooperative to mildly annoyed, as if the adults were overcomplicating things. The backpack itself became the next pivotal piece, recovered from a dumpster just blocks away, its contents a silent witness to the afternoon's events. Investigators had followed tips from neighbors who recalled seeing a child rummaging near the bins, leading them straight to the discarded item. Inside, faint traces of disturbance matched samples from the Alvarez home, confirmed through lab analysis that left no room for coincidence. Alex, when shown photos of the backpack, paused longer this time, his earlier shrug replaced by a fleeting frown. He claimed he had lost it weeks ago, a story that didn't hold up against his mother's recollection of seeing it that very morning. The interview stretched on, so detectives probing gently about why he might have been at the neighbor's or if something had upset him that day. Alex deflected, asking questions of his own about how cameras worked or what happened next, his curiosity more evident than any sign of worry. It was this untouchable air that began to grate, a subtle arrogance peeking through the child's facade, making the team wonder about the depths of his understanding. As the session wrapped, the weight of accumulating evidence hung heavy, promising more revelations as lab results trickled in. Alex was released to his mother's care pending further review, but the case was accelerating, with prosecutors reviewing every angle. The community, hearing whispers of the boy's involvement, buzzed with a mix of disbelief and growing anger. How could someone so young be at the center of such loss? Families of the victims found some solace in the progress, though the pain remained raw, a constant ache. Detectives left the station that night with files stacking up, knowing the digital and physical trails were converging. Alex, back home, resumed his routines, but the net was closing, his casual denials no match for the meticulous work unfolding behind the scenes. Would you have seen through his story from the start, or does youth cloud judgment in ways we can't predict? The question stirred debates in local circles as the investigation pressed on, each clue a step toward clarity. The station's fluorescent lights buzzed late into the night, reports compiling, while outside, the suburb settled into an uneasy quiet. The lab results were on their way, poised to transform suspicion into something unbreakable, a turning point that would test the limits of what a child could comprehend, and what society demanded in return. As the lab results inched closer to confirmation, transforming whispers of doubt into ironclad links, investigators turned their gaze to the invisible trails left in the digital ether, footprints that no amount of denial could erase. Alex's tablet, seized during the home search, became a treasure trove of revelations, its history subpoenaed with swift court approval. In the quiet glow of forensic screens, analysts uncovered searches that painted a picture of premeditated curiosity, queries typed out in the dead of night just days before the tragedy. "Sure, how old do you have to be to go to jail?" one read, time-stamped at 11:47 p.m., 3 nights prior, followed by, "Can a kid be tried as an adult?" and variations that hinted at a mind weighing risks like pieces on a game board. It wasn't the frantic typing of fear, but the deliberate probing of someone testing boundaries, convinced that youth was an unbreakable shield. These digital echoes, recovered from browser caches and cloud backups, aligned too perfectly with the timeline, suggesting Alex had been plotting not in haste, but with a chilling foresight that made detectives exchange uneasy glances. The neighborhood's shock deepened as rumors of these findings leaked, families wondering how a child's innocent device could harbor such dark intent. Deeper dives into Alex's online world revealed more layers, like deleted chat messages that forensics painstakingly reconstructed from server fragments. One exchange with a school friend, erased but not gone, stood out. "I could get away with it," Alex had typed, followed by a laughing emoji, in a conversation about pranks that veered into hypotheticals about bigger rules. The friend, questioned later, recalled it as odd but dismissed it as kid talk, never imagining the weight it carried. Timestamps placed this just 2 days before the afternoon at the Alvarez home, weaving into the narrative of calculation rather than impulse. Alex's online presence was otherwise typical. Gaming forums, our video streams, but these anomalies stuck out like shadows in sunlight, hinting at a fascination with consequences that went beyond play. Investigators noted how he had browsed articles on famous cases involving young offenders, absorbing details about leniency and loopholes, his curiosity masked as casual scrolling. It was as if he was building a mental fortress, one where age equaled immunity, and the digital breadcrumbs now crumbled that illusion piece by piece. New school records added another thread to the unraveling story, pulled from databases with parental consent and court orders. Alex had mentioned to a teacher once that Diego picked on him, complaining of teasing during driveway games, but no formal reports existed, no notes and files, no interventions logged. Classmates confirmed minor banter, the kind common among kids, like joking about missed shots or game scores, but nothing that rose to bullying. This discrepancy suggested Alex had amplified slights in his mind, twisting them into justifications that fueled whatever drove him that day. Motive emerged not as clear revenge, but something more experimental, a test of limits, perhaps born from boredom or a deeper detachment that psychologists would later explore. The digital trail painted him as aware, not oblivious, someone who researched outcomes before acting, his arrogance rooted in the belief that knowledge would protect him. Our community whispers turned to outrage, parents checking their own children's devices, grappling with how online worlds could nurture such hidden thoughts. When detectives brought Alex back for another round of questions, armed with printouts of these digital artifacts, the room felt heavier, the air thick with unspoken accusations. They laid out the search history first, page by page, watching his small face for reactions. Alex glanced at the papers, his expression unchanging, before asking casually for a soda, as if the moment was just another break in his day. There were no tears streaming down his cheeks, no shaking hands or pleas for understanding, just a steady gaze and a shrug that echoed his earlier denials. "Everyone searches stuff," he said simply, deflecting with the logic of a child who thought he could outsmart the system. Detectives pressed gently, asking why those specific questions, why at that exact time, but Alex pivoted, are inquiring about the forensics process instead, his curiosity shining through like a light in the dim room. It was this lack of emotional response that unsettled them most, a flatness where fear or regret should have been, reinforcing the growing sense that this wasn't a momentary lapse, but something more innate. The chat messages came next, projected on a screen for clarity, the recovered text, glaring in black and white. "I could get away with it." The words hung there, undeniable, tied to his account through IP logs and device IDs. Alex stared, his jaw tightening just a fraction, the first crack in his untouchable facade. He claimed it was about a video game cheat, a harmless boast, but the timing betrayed him, aligning too closely with the revolver's disappearance from his mother's drawer. Investigators noted his pulse remained even. No spike of panic, just a mild annoyance at being cornered. This digital evidence, combined with the physical traces, formed a chain that linked intent to action, shifting the case from suspicion to something prosecutable. Outside the station, media vans gathered, reporters piecing together leaks that fueled public fascination and fury. How could a 10-year-old navigate such planning without a trace of remorse? As the session ended, Alex was escorted out, his mother waiting with worried eyes. But the weight of the findings lingered like an unspoken verdict. The digital footprints had exposed not just actions, but a mindset that challenged everything society assumed about childhood innocence. Families of the victims found a bittersweet solace in these revelations, proof that their loss wasn't random, but rooted in choices made with awareness. Debates raged in online forums and local gatherings. Was this the product of environment or something wired deeper? The investigation pressed forward, subpoenas expanding to social media logs, each byte of data another nail in the coffin of doubt. Would you see these searches as innocent curiosity or as the blueprint for something unforgivable? The question echoed through the community, stirring emotions that blended rage with a reluctant empathy for youth's complexities. As night fell over Dayton, screens glowed with recovered data, illuminating paths once hidden. He thought he'd never be caught, but the glow of those timestamps told a different story, flickering like warnings in the dark. He thought he'd never be caught. But the glow of those timestamps told a different story, flickering like warnings in the dark, a prelude to the storm that was about to break over the Dayton courthouse. Prosecutors, armed with the mounting evidence from digital trails and forensic matches, faced a profound dilemma that tested the very foundations of Ohio's juvenile justice system. At 10 years old, Alex fell into a gray area where the law rarely ventured. Statutes designed to protect young offenders from the full weight of adult consequences, emphasizing rehabilitation over punishment. Yet, the gravity of the acts, involving 3 lives lost in such a calculated manner, pushed boundaries that hadn't been crossed in decades. Behind closed doors, legal teams debated late into the night, weighing public safety against the principles of youth development. Knowing that charging someone so young as an adult was not just rare, but almost unheard of in the state. The case's details, the premeditated searches, the methodical sequence at the Alvarez home, tilted the scales toward accountability. But the boy's age loomed like an unyielding barrier. As word spread through legal circles, experts predicted a battle that could set precedents, with national attention already turning eyes toward this quiet suburb. Public outrage swelled like a rising tide, transforming neighborhood whispers into a roar that echoed across media outlets and social platforms. Vigils sprang up outside the Alvarez duplex, candles illuminating faces etched with grief and anger, as community members demanded answers that went beyond leniency. News vans parked along the streets, reporters interviewing tearful neighbors who recounted the trust once shared, now shattered by the boy's alleged actions. Online petitions circulated, calling for justice that honored the victims' memories, with hashtags trending that blended sorrow with calls for reform. The families of Maria, Diego, and Elena stood at the forefront, their quiet dignity a stark contrast to the frenzy. Maria's sister speaking to cameras with a steady voice, urging that age shouldn't erase the harm done. This groundswell pressured prosecutors who knew inaction could erode faith in the system, yet rushing forward risked appeals and ethical quagmires. In the prosecutor's office, files piled high, each piece of evidence scrutinized for flaws as they prepared a filing that would ignite debates about where childhood ends and responsibility begins. The charges were filed in juvenile court with a gravity that silenced the room. 3 counts of aggravated harm leading to loss of life, phrased to capture the deliberate intent without sensationalism. The document outlined the sequence, the weapons acquisition, the entry without force, and the controlled actions that left no room for accident. Alex, upon hearing the news through his attorney, reacted with a laugh that echoed in the holding area, a sound that chilled those who overheard it, as if the words were lines from one of his games, not the weight of real consequences. His mother, present for the arraignment, clutched her hands tightly, her face a mask of disbelief and quiet despair, whispering pleas for understanding. The judge, reviewing the initial petition, denied bail in a measured tone, citing the seriousness of the allegations and the need to ensure community safety. Courtroom observers noted Alex's demeanor, legs swinging under the table, a faint smile playing on his lips as he whispered to his lawyer, seemingly unfazed by the proceedings. This untouchable air only fueled the growing narrative of arrogance, turning public sentiment from sympathy to a demand for reckoning. Then came the pivotal motion, a discretionary request to transfer the case to adult court, filed with supporting affidavits that highlighted the premeditation and lack of remorse. It was a move that had never been granted for someone Alex's age in that county, a legal long shot rooted in statutes allowing exceptions for particularly severe acts. Prosecutors argued that the boy's awareness, evident in his searches and calm aftermath, warranted treating him beyond juvenile protections. by emphasizing protection for society over individual leniency. The defense, scrambling to respond, painted a picture of vulnerability, citing developmental science and the potential for growth. Families wept in the gallery, holding photos of their lost loved ones, their presence a silent plea for the system to see the full human cost. Media coverage exploded, with legal analysts dissecting the odds on evening broadcasts, predicting a hearing that could reshape juvenile law. Alex, back in detention, adjusted with an ease that guards noted. No visible distress, just routine compliance, as if waiting out a timeout rather than facing a historic shift. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the motion hearing date approached, national outlets sending correspondents to cover what was being called a landmark case. Whispers of precedent filled the halls, with comparisons to rare historical instances where youth and severity clashed. Prosecutors prepared exhibits, the digital logs, the surveillance stills, ready to demonstrate intent that transcended age. The judge, known for thoughtful rulings, recessed multiple times during preliminary arguments, her expression unreadable. Alex entered each session in a neat outfit, his small frame dwarfed by the bench, yet his eyes held a spark of defiance that didn't waver. When asked directly if he understood the stakes, he nodded casually, offering no further words. This moment amplified the tension, a child's composure clashing with the adult weight of the room. Outside, protesters gathered peacefully, signs calling for balanced justice, while online forums debated the ethics. Could society afford mercy when trust had been so profoundly broken? As arguments wrapped, the air thickened with unspoken questions about fairness and finality. The defense urged caution, highlighting brain science that showed immaturity in decision-making, while pleading for a chance at redemption. Prosecutors countered with the victims' stories, reminding the court of lives forever altered. The families sat in stoic silence, their grief a palpable force that influenced every word spoken. Would the motion pass, thrusting Alex into a realm where sentences stretched decades? The community held its breath, vigils continuing under streetlights, candles symbolizing hope amid darkness. This mini-climax tested not just the law, but the moral fabric of those involved as the gavel's potential fall loomed like a turning point. In the end, the filing stood as a challenge to conventions, a document that could either reinforce protections or carve new paths. Alex's laugh from earlier echoed in memories, a sound now overshadowed by the machinery of justice gearing up. The county had never seen such a push, and as the hearing adjourned, one thing was clear. Boundaries were bending. History was about to shift. And history was about to shift in ways that would ripple through legal textbooks and community conversations for years. But before any ruling could fall, the court mandated a deeper look into the mind behind the facade, a psychological evaluation that peeled back layers of detachment and defiance. Court-appointed experts, specialists in child development and behavioral assessments, stepped in with a mix of clinical tools and compassionate questioning, and their sessions unfolding in a neutral room designed to feel safe rather than stark. Alex arrived for his first appointment in casual clothes, his small frame settling into a chair with the same casual air he had shown in interrogations, as if this were just another school day detour. The psychologist started gently, building rapport through games and drawings, observing how he engaged or didn't. His responses were measured, factual, or without the emotional flourishes one might expect from a child recounting upheaval. When asked about the afternoon at the Alvarez home, he described events in flat tones, like narrating a video game level, showing no flicker of sorrow for the lives altered forever. This emotional flatness, noted in detailed reports, hinted at something beyond typical youth, a potential conduct disorder marked by callous traits where empathy seemed like a missing puzzle piece. Over weeks of evaluations, The experts delved into Alex's world, administering standardized tests that measured everything from intelligence to emotional processing. His IQ landed squarely in the average range, no signs of intellectual barriers that might explain lapses in judgment, ruling out any easy defenses of diminished capacity. Competency assessments confirmed he understood right from wrong, grasping concepts of rules and repercussions with a clarity that surprised even the evaluators. When probed about the digital searches, he admitted curiosity about what happens to kids who mess up, framing it as idle wondering rather than planning, but his lack of regret shone through. One psychologist testified later that Alex described the sequence of events factually, without tears or tremors, as if recounting a neutral experiment. High scores on conduct disorder scales emerged, pointing to patterns of thrill-seeking and emotional shallowness, traits that made the team pause and reflect on how such elements could manifest so early. Yet there were glimpses of vulnerability, moments where he spoke of feeling overlooked at home, hints of isolation that the defense would later seize upon as roots of his actions. The reports painted a complex portrait, a boy aware of his choices, yet perhaps wired in ways that muted the human connections most take for granted. Family history came under the microscope too, and with evaluators interviewing Alex's mother and reviewing records that revealed a home life marked by inconsistency, long work hours leaving him to his own devices, sporadic involvement from extended relatives. No overt signs of severe trauma surfaced, but subtle neglect wove through the narrative, like missed school events or unsupervised afternoons that fostered independence too soon. Alex spoke of these in detached snippets, showing little resentment, and as if emotions were optional add-ons to his daily routine. Psychologists noted his limited remorse, a key factor in their findings. When asked how he felt about the Alvarez family's pain, he shrugged, saying, "Stuff happens," a response that echoed in the evaluator's notes as profoundly unsettling. This lack of empathy aligned with emerging profiles of callous, unemotional traits, rare but documented in youth, where actions stem from curiosity rather than malice or fear. The sessions built a bridge between behavior and brain science, highlighting how immature frontal lobes might explain impulsivity. Yet Alex's planning suggested a maturity that complicated the picture. Defense experts prepared counterarguments, emphasizing rehabilitation's potential, while prosecutors saw the reports as ammunition for accountability. In the courtroom, these psychological insights became a focal point during preliminary hearings, with evaluators taking the stand to unpack their findings in accessible terms. One described Alex's flat effect as a mask that hides deeper disconnects, prompting murmurs from the gallery where families sat, their grief reignited by the clinical dissection of motive. The prosecutor asked pointed questions. Did he know what he was doing? The response was affirmative, underscoring awareness that pierced through age-based excuses. Defense attorneys countered with studies on brain plasticity, in arguing that 10-year-olds aren't fully formed, their paths malleable with the right interventions. Alex watched from his seat, doodling on a notepad, his expression unchanging amid the testimony that dissected his inner world. This exposure fueled public rage as media snippets highlighted the chilling detachment, turning online discussions into battlegrounds over nature versus nurture. Would you believe such traits are fixable, or do they demand safeguards for society's sake? The question lingered, stirring empathy for a child possibly shaped by unseen forces, yet tempered by the irreversible harm he had caused. The evaluations, wrapped with comprehensive reports bound for the judge's review, documents that balanced science with the stark reality of the case. They acknowledged Alex's youth as a factor in emotional development, yet emphasized his grasp of consequences, a duality that mirrored the case's moral tension. In detention, Alex adapted seamlessly. Following routines without complaint, his days a blend of structured activities that masked any inner turmoil. Community members, following the updates, grappled with the revelations, some seeing a troubled boy in need of help, others a figure whose actions defied forgiveness. The families of Maria, Diego, and Elena found the insights bittersweet, a window into why, but not a balm for their loss. As the report circulated, they amplified calls for justice that honored the victims' humanity, pushing the legal process toward its next pivotal turn. Prosecutors leaned on the findings to bolster their transfer motion, arguing that awareness equaled readiness for adult scrutiny. The defense, armed with developmental caveats, fought for juvenile leniency, highlighting success stories of reformed youth. The courtroom air thickened with anticipation, each testimony a thread in a tapestry of psychology and law. Alex's mother attended sessions quietly, on her eyes reflecting a mix of hope and heartbreak, whispering prayers for understanding. This deep dive into his psyche not only informed the case, but evoked a broader curiosity about how young minds navigate right and wrong, blending rage at the detachment with a reluctant empathy for untapped potential. Was that evaluation a step toward true insight, or just another layer in a story of unavoidable reckoning? Debates swirled as the reports closed doors on easy explanations, opening others to deeper questions of accountability. The evaluator's notebook snapped shut, its pages heavy with observations that would soon echo in the halls of justice. The evaluator's notebook snapped shut, its pages heavy with observations that would soon echo in the halls of justice, setting the stage for a hearing that packed the Dayton courtroom beyond capacity, drawing eyes from across the nation. Reporters crammed into the back rows, notebooks at the ready, while families of the victims sat in quiet solidarity, their presence a living reminder of the stakes. The air hummed with tension as the judge called the session to order, her gavel's sharp tap cutting through the murmurs like a signal for the drama to unfold. Alex was led in, his small hands cuffed loosely for the short walk, dressed in a simple shirt and pants that made him look even younger against the grand wooden bench. He took his seat at the defense table, glancing around with mild interest as if the packed room were just a curious gathering rather than the arena deciding his fate. Prosecutors wasted no time, rising to present their case for transfer to adult court, their voices steady and firm, weaving evidence into a narrative of deliberate choices that demanded more than juvenile leniency. The motion, they argued, wasn't about vengeance, but about safeguarding a community still healing from profound loss, and emphasizing how Alex's actions showed a level of awareness rare for his age. The surveillance footage played first, projected on a large screen that dominated the courtroom, its grainy images pulling gasps from the gallery. 3 figures moved in sequence, entering the Alvarez home, then the small shadow departing alone, backpack adjusted with casual ease. Timestamps glowed unforgivingly, aligning with digital logs and witness accounts, leaving no shadows for doubt to hide in. Our prosecutors narrated softly, highlighting the cartoon patch on the strap, the unhurried stride that spoke of composure rather than chaos. Alex watched without flinching, his face a blank slate, though a juror later confided how that stillness sent chills down their spine. Defense attorneys objected at points, questioning the footage's enhancement techniques, but the judge overruled, allowing the visual proof to stand as a cornerstone. This theater of evidence built curiosity into conviction, at each frame a step toward exposing the planning that turned a neighborly visit into irreversible harm. Outside, media crews filmed updates, the story captivating viewers who tuned in for glimpses of a case blurring lines between childhood and accountability. The room felt alive with unspoken questions. Could such intent truly fit within a 10-year-old's world? Defense counsel rose next, their opening laced with empathy, painting Alex as a product of circumstances rather than inherent flaw. They emphasized his age, 10 years old, still in the phase where brains wire connections slowly, decisions more impulse then intent. Charts flashed on the screen, illustrating developmental stages, experts testifying via prepared statements about how youth often lack full foresight. Alex's mother took the stand briefly, her voice trembling as she described a home filled with love but strained by long hours, pleading for the court to see her son as redeemable, not lost. She spoke of his quiet nature, the way he helped with chores without complaint, tears welling as she avoided the victim's family's gazes. This humanizing push aimed to counter the cold facts, urging mercy in a system built for second chances. Alex nodded along at times, his small nods drawing sympathetic whispers from some observers. Yet his overall calm only amplified the divide. Arrogance to some, innocence to others. The judge listened intently, her notes meticulous, as the defense wove science into their plea, challenging the notion that transfer served justice rather than haste. Prosecutors rebutted with precision, calling back to the psychological reports that affirmed Alex's grasp of right and wrong, his searches a blueprint of forethought. They argued the severity warranted exception, citing state laws that allowed discretion for acts shaking community foundations. A forensic expert detailed the sequence again, powder patterns and timelines reinforcing control over panic. The courtroom theater peaked here, emotions spiking as a victim's relative spoke from the stand, voice steady despite sorrow, recounting Maria's kindness and Diego's dreams. Elena's gentle spirit lives not statistics, but echoes demanding recognition. Gasps rippled when the judge asked Alex directly, "Do you understand why you're here?" He replied softly, "Because they say I did it." His words hanging in the air like a challenge, no hint of apology or fear. This moment shifted the energy, defense attorneys exchanging glances, while prosecutors nodded subtly, seeing it as further proof of detachment. The gallery buzzed quietly, debates simmering about whether youth excused or explained such responses. As closing arguments wrapped, the defense urged caution, warning that adult court could crush potential for growth, painting a future of rehabilitation over isolation. Prosecutors countered with the weight of harm. 3 families forever changed, insisting protection trumped pity. The judge recessed, her expression thoughtful, promising a swift ruling amid the mounting pressure. Alex was escorted out, his steps light as whispers followed. Had his calm demeanor helped or hurt? Media outside dissected every detail, experts predicting outcomes that could redefine boundaries. The hearing had transformed the courtroom into a stage where law met humanity, curiosity building to a fever pitch. And families held hands in the front row, their quiet strength a counterpoint to the legal storm, hoping for a decision that honored their loss without bitterness. The recess stretched, tension coiling like a spring as all eyes turned to the bench for the words that would tip the scales. Would transfer shatter precedents, or would juvenile safeguards hold? The question fueled endless speculation, blending rage at the untouchable air with a curiosity about justice's true form. In that packed space, emotions swirled, empathy for a boy's potential, fury for lives stolen, creating a tapestry of moral complexity. History hovered on the edge, the judge's return imminent, her decision poised to echo far beyond these walls. The air thickened, anticipation a palpable force as the theater of law prepared its next act. The smirk faded, slightly, as Alex glanced back at the screen, the footage's glow lingering in his eyes like an unspoken accusation. The smirk faded, slightly, as Alex glanced back at the screen, the footage's glow lingering in his eyes like an unspoken accusation, a fleeting crack in the armor he had worn so confidently. But the moment passed, and as the judge returned from recess, the courtroom held its collective breath, the weight of history pressing down on every soul present. Her ruling came swiftly, voice steady and clear, granting the transfer to adult court, the first in the county's records for someone under 11, on a decision that stunned observers and sent ripples through the gallery. Gasps echoed, followed by sobs from the victims' families, their relief mingled with the raw ache of loss, while Alex's mother buried her face in her hands, whispering denials into the heavy air. Prosecutors nodded solemnly, seeing it as a step toward true accountability, while defense attorneys scrambled, already planning appeals that would challenge the boundaries of youth and law. Alex himself blinked once, his expression hardening into something unreadable, the untouchable facade slipping just enough to reveal a boy confronting the edges of his own certainty. Media outside erupted, cameras flashing as experts hailed it a landmark shift, one that balanced mercy with the demands of safety in a world where age no longer shielded all actions. The gavel's strike sealed it, thrusting the case into a new realm where sentences could stretch far beyond childhood's end. A mini-climax that transformed curiosity into the sharp edge of consequence. In the days that followed, Alex entered the adult court for his arraignment in an oversized suit that hung loosely on his frame, the room a stark contrast to the juvenile halls with their softer edges. Bailiffs flanked him, their presence a reminder of the elevated stakes, as he stood before a judge whose bench seemed towering from his vantage point. He pleaded not guilty, voice small but steady, eyes scanning the courtroom with a mix of defiance and detachment that drew murmurs from the packed seats. The victims' families stared silently, holding framed photos like talismans, their quiet strength a counterpoint to the boy's composure. Maria's sister clutching Diego's model plane, Elena's brother wiping away a tear. Prosecutors outlined the evidence chain once more, from digital searches to surveillance timestamps, painting a picture of intent that the defense attempted to blur with motions for suppression. They argued the search history was obtained without proper warrants, a technicality that could unravel threads, but the judge denied the motion after careful review, her ruling firm amid the tension. Alex whispered to his lawyer during breaks, his words inaudible, but his posture straight, as if the proceedings were a puzzle he could still solve. This new arena amplified the drama, national headlines framing it as a test of justice's reach, blending public rage with debates over whether such a young mind could truly comprehend the path ahead. The case's elevation to adult court cracked Alex's arrogance further, subtle shifts emerging in his demeanor that those close to the proceedings noted with quiet fascination. In holding cells between hearings, guards observed him doodling less, staring at walls more, the casual shrugs giving way to moments of tight-lipped silence. His mother visited often, her conversations laced with pleas for him to show emotion, to let the world see the boy she knew. But Alex responded with flat assurances, as if remorse were a switch he hadn't yet flipped. Psychological reports, now public in redacted form, fueled media analyses, experts dissecting his callous traits against backdrops of brain scans and case studies. Online forums buzzed with opinions, some decrying the transfer as cruel, others praising it as necessary protection. The divide deepening as vigils continued in the neighborhood. The Alvarez duplex stood empty now, a for sale sign swaying in the wind, symbolizing a community forever marked, where trust rebuilt slowly amid shared memories of laughter that once filled those rooms. Prosecutors prepared for trial, their strategy honed on exposing the planning that turned neighborly bonds into unbreakable loss, while the defense sought experts to testify on redemption's possibilities. But arrogance met its first true fracture during a pre-trial conference, where Alex faced direct questioning from the bench about his understanding of the charges. "Do you realize the seriousness here?" the judge asked, her tone measured but probing. He nodded, but for the first time his voice wavered slightly, a hesitation that didn't escape notice, a boy glimpsing the vastness of what lay beyond his games and gadgets. The moment passed quickly, his facade snapping back, but it lingered in the minds of observers, a hint that the untouchable air was thinning under the weight of adult scrutiny. Families of the victims found solace in this, whispering among themselves that perhaps awareness was dawning, even if slowly. Media captured the scene in sound bites, framing it as a turning point where youth collided with reality, sparking broader conversations about accountability in an age of digital savvy. The courtroom, with its polished wood and echoing acoustics, became a stage for this internal shift, each session peeling away layers of denial. Defense motions for delays were granted sparingly, the judge prioritizing momentum, ensuring the case didn't languish in limbo. As preparations intensified, the prosecution's outline solidified, promising a trial that would lay bare every detail, from the revolver's path to the calm aftermath, without sensationalism, focusing on facts that demanded reflection. Alex's legal team countered with plans for character witnesses, including teachers who recalled his helpful side, aiming to humanize him amid the storm. Yet, the transfer's impact echoed widest in the community, where parents held town halls on youth mental health, blending grief with proactive hope. The families channeled their pain into foundations, scholarships in Diego's name for aspiring pilots, community programs honoring Maria's kindness and Elena's teaching spirit. This resilience contrasted sharply with Alex's cracking composure, a narrative thread that wove rage into reluctant empathy. Would you see this as the beginning of growth, or merely the facade crumbling under pressure? The question stirred debates as the case hurtled toward trial, emotions spiking with each court date. The smirk, once a constant, appeared less frequently now, replaced by fleeting glances of uncertainty that humanized the boy even as justice loomed. In detention, he asked more questions about the process, his curiosity turning inward, perhaps pondering the paths not taken. Prosecutors reviewed evidence montages, ensuring every link held, while the defense sought mitigating angles, the battle lines drawn in a courtroom that felt increasingly like a crossroads. National attention peaked, with documentaries in the works, capturing the human drama at its core, a story of loss, intent, and the thin line between mercy and reckoning. This mini-climax of transfer, granted, not only shifted the legal landscape, but exposed vulnerabilities, arrogance yielding to the slow grind of reality. The courtroom doors swung shut after each session, but the echoes carried far, reminding all that some choices ripple endlessly. Families left with heads high, their pursuit of closure unwavering as the system prepared to test its limits. The gavel struck like thunder, finalizing the move to adult court, a sound that reverberated through Alex's world, marking the end of one chapter and the inexorable pull toward judgment. The gavel struck like thunder, finalizing the move to adult court, a sound that reverberated through Alex's world, marking the end of one chapter and the inexorable pull toward judgment, a trial that would lay bare every thread of evidence in a meticulous montage designed to leave no doubt. As the proceedings opened weeks later, the courtroom swelled with a tense hush. Our jurors seated in their box, eyes wide with the weight of their duty, while Alex sat at the defense table, his small hands folded neatly, the oversized suit a constant reminder of the mismatch between his age and the arena. Prosecutors began with opening statements, their words painting a canvas of calculated steps, from the quiet theft of the revolver to the calm exit captured on tape, urging the jury to see beyond youth to the choices that shattered 3 families. So defense counsel countered softly, framing Alex as a child adrift in a sea of unmet needs, his actions a tragic misstep rather than malice, pleading for compassion in a system that could still foster change. The judge nodded evenly, her instructions clear. Focus on facts, not emotion, though the air crackled with unspoken feelings as the first witnesses took the stand. Outside, media clustered, broadcasting live updates that drew viewers nationwide, each detail fueling debates about where mercy meets accountability in the shadow of such profound loss. The forensic montage unfolded like a carefully scripted reveal, starting with the gunshot residue expert who stepped to the podium, voice precise as she explained the powder traces found on Alex's clothing, patterns that matched the close-range nature of the acts. She held up charts describing how stippling on fabric aligned with the timeline, in each mark a silent testament to proximity and intent, ruling out any notion of accident or distance. Jurors leaned forward, notebooks scribbling, as she connected the dots to the revolver recovered from the dumpster, its barrel etched with matching residues that forensics had linked through chemical analysis. Alex watched with folded arms, his expression neutral, though a faint shift in his posture suggested the weight was settling deeper. The defense cross-examined gently, questioning collection methods and potential contamination, but the expert's responses held firm, her expertise a bulwark against doubt. This testimony wove into the broader narrative, evoking quiet rage among observers as they recalled the Alvarez home's warmth, now forever altered by choices that left traces no cleaning could erase. Families in the gallery clutched tissues, their grief reignited by the clinical details, a reminder that science could illuminate truth, but not mend hearts. A ballistics took center stage next, the analyst projecting diagrams that traced bullet paths with unerring accuracy, confirming the revolver's role in the sequence that claimed Maria, Diego, and Elena. He detailed how casings recovered at the scene matched the weapon's unique firing pin impressions, timestamps from the surveillance aligning to show a 12-minute window of deliberate action. No wild shots, no chaos, just a controlled progression that spoke of forethought, each point building the case like bricks in a wall. Jurors nodded, some exchanging glances, as the expert rebutted defense suggestions of tampering, his voice steady amid the room's growing tension. Alex doodled on a pad during lulls, his small fingers moving absently, but the montage pressed on, digital analysts stepping up to reconstruct deleted messages and search histories. Screens glowed with recovered texts. "I could get away with it," and queries about age and consequences, each one time-stamped like echoes of planning. The jury watched intently, curiosity spiking into realization as the links formed an unbreakable chain, blending technology with tragedy in a way that demanded reflection on how young minds navigate digital shadows. Forensic animation brought the timeline to life, a virtual recreation projected for all to see, walking the jury through the afternoon step by step, from Alex's entry at 4:03 p.m. to his departure, backpack lighter, at 4:15 p.m. The animator narrated calmly, highlighting geolocation pings and shoeprint matches, each element syncing with witness accounts and lab results to dispel any haze of uncertainty. Defense attorneys challenged the animation's assumptions, arguing it relied on hypotheticals. But the judge allowed it, noting its role in clarifying complex sequences. This visual aid, though described without flair, evoked a hush, jurors imagining the quiet duplex turned silent, the montage a bridge between abstract evidence and human cost. Alex's mother testified reluctantly after, her words halting as she confirmed the revolver's storage and Alex's access, tears streaming as she avoided his gaze, her love clashing with the facts unfolding. Prosecutors handled her gently, extracting admissions that bolstered their case, while the defense used her to underscore a home of overlooked signals, a plea for understanding amid the proof. Child psychologists followed, called by the defense to counter the tide, their testimony delving into brain science with charts showing underdeveloped impulse control in youth. One expert spoke of how 10-year-olds process risks differently, urging the jury to see potential for growth rather than permanence, her words a counterpoint to the forensic barrage. Prosecutors rebutted swiftly, recalling earlier evaluations that affirmed Alex's awareness, are cross-examining on how planning, like the searches, transcended typical immaturity. The exchange heightened the emotional peak, rage simmering as jurors weighed detachment against development, the montage now a tapestry of science clashing with sorrow. Families listened intently, Maria's sister whispering prayers, their presence a quiet force amid the theater. Would you lean toward science's hope, or let evidence's clarity guide the path? The question hung unspoken, stirring the room's undercurrent as testimonies wrapped, leaving the jury to ponder the balance of facts and forgiveness. The prosecution rested after this exhaustive display, their montage a comprehensive web that exposed every layer, from residue to reconstruction, ensuring no thread dangled loose. Defense motions for dismissal were denied, the judge praising the thoroughness while reminding all of the human elements at play. Alex, throughout, maintained a composed front, but fleeting glances at the screens suggested the untouchable air was fraying, arrogance meeting the relentless march of proof. The courtroom emptied slowly each day, echoes of testimony lingering like ghosts as preparations turned to closings. Community vigils outside grew, candles symbolizing resilience, while media dissected the montage's impact, framing it as a pivotal shift toward justice. This forensic deep dive not only fortified the case, but evoked a justice spike, a proof mounting like waves cresting toward resolution, blending curiosity with the satisfaction of clarity. Jurors retired for breaks with heavy expressions, the weight of decisions pressing as the trial hurtled toward deliberations. Families found a measure of peace in the revelations, honoring their loved ones through the process, even as debates raged on youth's capacity for change. Screens dimmed, the animation's final frame freezing on the empty hallway, a silent echo of paths crossed and lives forever diverged. Screens dimmed, the animation's final frame freezing on the empty hallway, a silent echo of paths crossed and lives forever diverged, leaving the courtroom in a hush that begged for voices to fill the void. As the trial pressed forward, the focus shifted from cold evidence to the warm pulse of human stories, inviting the families of Maria, Diego, and Elena to speak, their words a bridge between loss and the quest for understanding. Maria's sister, Rosa, took the stand first, her hand steady on the wooden rail despite the tremor in her voice, describing the last phone call she shared with her sibling that fateful morning. It was a routine chat, filled with plans for a family gathering and laughter over shared memories from their childhood in Mexico, Maria's optimism shining through as she mentioned Diego's latest school achievement and Elena's excitement about the visit. Rosa paused, her eyes glistening, recounting how Maria ended the call with, "Talk soon, Hermana," a promise now eternally unkept, her testimony weaving threads of everyday joy that the afternoon's events had unraveled forever. Jurors leaned in, notebooks paused, as she spoke of Maria's tireless spirit, the way she juggled jobs to build a better life, her kindness a light in the neighborhood that drew people like Alex into their circle without hesitation. The room felt smaller, the weight of her words turning abstract charges into personal heartaches, evoking a quiet empathy that softened the edges of rage simmering beneath. Diego's coach followed, a burly man with a gentle demeanor who stepped up to share memories of the 15-year-old's dreams, his voice thick with emotion as he described practices in the driveway where Diego honed his skills, always encouraging younger kids like Alex to join in. He painted Diego as a natural leader, the teen who dreamed of soaring through the skies in the Air Force, poring over aviation books and sketching planes during downtime, his enthusiasm infectious enough to inspire teammates. The coach recalled a recent game where Diego scored the winning shot, celebrating not for himself, but for the team, a moment that now stood as a poignant symbol of potential stolen. Tears welled in his eyes as he spoke of the scholarship fund started in Diego's name, a way to keep his aspirations alive for others, emphasizing how the boy's protective nature, always standing up for friends, made the betrayal feel even deeper. Alex stared at the ceiling during this testimony, his small frame still, as if the words floated above him untouched. But jurors shifted uncomfortably, one wiping away a tear, the emotional tide building into a resolve that justice must honor such unfulfilled promise. The gallery murmured softly, the coach's words stirring a rage that bubbled up, directed at the senseless end to a life brimming with hope, yet tempered by the shared humanity that bound everyone in the room. Elena's father appeared via video link from Texas, his face filling the screen with a quiet dignity that commanded attention, his voice steady as he described his daughter's gentle soul, the school teacher who nurtured young minds with patience and stories that sparked curiosity. He recounted her excitement for the trip to Ohio, packing small gifts for Diego and planning to share family recipes with Maria, her visit a brief escape from her classroom duties back home. Elena had always been the peacemaker, he said, the one who resolved conflicts with kind words and open hearts, making her final moments in that duplex all the more heartbreaking. A woman who trusted easily, welcoming Alex like any neighborhood child. His testimony included anecdotes of Elena's students drawing pictures in her honor, their innocent tributes a stark contrast to the courtroom's gravity, evoking sobs from the audience as he pleaded for remembrance over anger. The video feed crackled slightly, but his message cut through, turning rage into a deeper empathy for lives intertwined and abruptly severed, jurors dabbing at eyes while Alex continued his ceiling gaze, the disconnect amplifying the emotional chasm. Families in the front row nodded along, their shared grief a unifying force, as the father's words lingered like a call for healing amid the pursuit of accountability. The courtroom cried collectively in those moments, a wave of muffled sobs and whispered comforts rippling through the seats as the family's testimonies layered personal details onto the forensic framework, humanizing the loss in ways evidence alone could not. Rosa spoke of Maria's favorite recipes passed down through generations, now recipes she'd teach her own children in tribute. The coach mentioned Diego's unfinished model plane, a project left on his desk like a frozen dream. Elena's father shared a photo of her smiling with her students, a snapshot of joy that the video displayed for all to see. This outpouring transformed abstract pain into vivid portraits, a rage spiking as listeners grappled with the why, how trust extended to a young neighbor could lead to such finality. Yet it fostered empathy too, a reminder that behind every charge were real people with laughter and plans, their absences echoing in empty homes and quiet streets. Alex's lack of visible reaction only heightened the tension, his upward stare a silent provocation that stirred resolve among jurors and observers alike, turning sorrow into a determined push for closure. Would you find space for forgiveness in the face of such heartfelt stories, or does the depth of their loss demand a firmer hand? The question hung in the air, unspoken but felt, as testimonies wrapped, leaving the room steeped in reflection. Prosecutors nodded respectfully during these accounts, allowing the emotional weight to settle without interruption, knowing it bolstered their call for justice that transcended age. Defense attorneys listened intently, are preparing to weave these narratives into pleas for understanding, highlighting how a child's missteps could ripple so far. The judge maintained order with gentle reminders, ensuring the flow remained focused, though her own expression softened at times, the human element piercing through legal formalities. Outside, media captured the day's essence in soundbites, framing the family's courage as a beacon amid darkness, sparking online discussions that blended support with debates on mercy's limits. The neighborhood, still healing, found strength in these shared stories, vigils growing with each trial day, candles symbolizing the light Maria, Diego, and Elena had brought. This chapter of voices not only deepened empathy, but spiked the emotional arc, rage giving way to a resolve that justice must reflect the full spectrum of harm and humanity. As the last family member stepped down, the courtroom exhaled. the testimony's impact lingering like a gentle storm's aftermath, blending tears with a quiet determination that carried into the trial's next phases. Jurors filed out for a break, their faces etched with the weight of what they'd heard, while Alex finally lowered his gaze, the ceiling offering no more escape. The families embraced in the hallway, their solidarity a testament to resilience as the process inched toward verdicts that could offer some measure of peace. Rage turned to resolve in that shared space, the family's words a catalyst for closure, even as questions of fairness loomed larger. Silence settled heavier than any outcry, the empty stand a poignant reminder of voices forever stilled. Silence settled heavier than any outcry, the empty stand a poignant reminder of voices forever stilled. But the trial's rhythm demanded progression, pulling the courtroom toward the culmination of deliberations in a mini-climax that held the weight of 3 lives in balance. After days of testimony and evidence, the jury retired to their chamber, a small room filled with notepads, coffee, and the echoes of everything they had heard, from forensic details to family heartaches, each juror carrying the burden of decision like an invisible yoke. Hours stretched into a tense vigil outside, families pacing hallways with clasped hands, by media speculating on outcomes that could redefine justice for the young. Inside, debates flowed, jurors revisiting the surveillance footage, the digital searches, the psychological profiles, weighing Alex's age against the deliberate sequence that ended Maria, Diego, and Elena's stories. One juror, later anonymous in interviews, described the room's intensity, how rage at the untouchable demeanor clashed with empathy for a boy's potential, to discussions circling back to intense clarity amid youth's fog. Alex waited in a holding area, his small frame curled on a bench, guards noting his unusual quiet, as if the trial's gravity had finally pierced his facade, turning arrogance into a subdued anticipation that hinted at dawning awareness. 14 hours ticked by, each one amplifying the courtroom's suspense, whispers outside growing into a hum of speculation as bailiffs guarded the door. Prosecutors reviewed notes in quiet corners, show confident in their montage's strength, while defense attorneys paced, hoping developmental arguments had sown seeds of doubt. The victims' families gathered in a nearby room, sharing stories of Maria's laughter, Diego's dreams, Elena's kindness, their unity a shield against the wait's agony. Candles from home vigils flickering in memory. When the jury signaled readiness, the courtroom reconvened swiftly. Seats filling with a rush of footsteps and held breaths, Alex led back to his table, his eyes meeting his mother's for a brief telling moment, her face etched with hope and fear. The 4 persons stood, voice steady but laced with the weight of consensus, as the judge prompted the reading. Guilty on all 3 counts of aggravated harm, leading to loss of life. Gasps erupted, followed by sobs from the gallery, a wave of relief washing over the victims' relatives as they embraced, tears streaming in a release that blended justice with enduring sorrow. Alex blinked once, his expression faltering for the first time, a subtle crack where untouchable calm gave way to something raw, his small hands clenching under the table, the verdict piercing the arrogance like light through shadow. The room's energy shifted in that instant, rage transforming into a tentative satisfaction. The guilty finding a vindication for the meticulous evidence and heartfelt testimonies that had built the case brick by brick. Prosecutors nodded solemnly, their work affirmed, while defense counsel comforted Alex's mother, already whispering of appeals that could challenge the transfer's historic edge. The judge scheduled sentencing for days later, her gavel striking to adjourn amid the buzz, ensuring the process moved with deliberate pace. Media swarmed the steps outside, broadcasting the verdict live, analysts praising the jury's thoroughness in navigating the case's complexities. Youth versus accountability, intent amid immaturity. A community reactions poured in online, some hailing it as overdue justice, others lamenting the system's harshness on a child, the divide a mirror to the trial's moral core. Families of the victims stepped into the sunlight, Rosa speaking briefly to cameras about closure's bittersweet taste, how the verdict honored their loved ones without erasing the void, a step toward healing in a neighborhood still shadowed by loss. Alex was escorted out, his steps slower, the untouchable air diminished. As if the word guilty had rewritten his internal script, sparking whispers of remorse's faint emergence. This verdict, a pivotal mini-climax, spiked the emotional arc toward resolution, proof's accumulation yielding the satisfaction of accountability, even as questions lingered about what came next. Jurors exited quietly, their duty done, faces reflecting the toll of deliberations that balanced empathy with evidence's unyielding truth. The courtroom emptied gradually, our echoes of the foreperson's words lingering, a turning point that shifted curiosity to contemplation of justice's form. Would you view this as fair reckoning, or a tragedy compounded by the system's reach? Debates swirled in forums and gatherings, blending relief with reflections on youth's fragility. Prosecutors prepared sentencing arguments focusing on community safety, while the defense sought leniency's path, the battle far from over. National attention intensified, and with legal scholars citing the case as a benchmark, its ripples extending to policy talks on juvenile transfers. In the quiet aftermath, Alex returned to detention, his routines unchanged, but his gaze more inward, perhaps pondering the paths that led here. Families held a small vigil that evening, candles glowing brighter with the verdict's light, honoring Maria, Diego, and Elena in a moment of collective exhale. The trial, though not concluded, had crossed a threshold, arrogance meeting verdict's force, setting the stage for sentencing's final word. Rage ebbed into resolve, the guilty pronouncement a bridge to whatever closure law could provide amid the enduring human tapestry of loss and hope. The envelope of the verdict, once sealed, now opened doors to the next phase, its words an echo that resonated long after the room fell silent. The envelope of the verdict, once sealed, now opened doors to the next phase, its words an echo that resonated long after the room fell silent, ushering in a period of intense debate that would shape the final contours of justice in this unprecedented case. Legal scholars across the nation turned their attention to Dayton, dissecting the implications of a 10-year-old's guilty verdict in adult court, their analyses filling airwaves and articles with arguments that balanced rehabilitation's promise against the shadows of public safety. Prosecutors, buoyed by the jury's decision, prepared sentencing recommendations with a focus on the maximum allowable under Ohio statutes, life with parole eligibility after decades, a term that reflected the gravity of 3 lives taken with such evident forethought. They consulted experts, weaving in victim impact statements and psychological reports to argue that Alex's detachment and planning warranted long-term oversight, not just for punishment, but to protect a society still grappling with the breach of trust in its quiet suburbs. Defense attorneys countered vigorously, filing motions for leniency that highlighted developmental science, insisting a child's brain could rewire with proper intervention, turning tragedy into a story of eventual redemption rather than perpetual isolation. The courtroom, though adjourned, buzzed in absentia through these preparations, into each side's briefs a volley in a debate that extended beyond the case to broader questions of how society treats its youngest offenders. Community forums and online platforms became arenas for this sentencing discourse, voices clashing in a symphony of opinions that mirrored the trial's emotional depth. Parents in the Dayton area organized panels, sharing fears about youth vulnerability while demanding assurances that such acts wouldn't recur. Their discussions blending empathy for Alex's age with unwavering support for the victims' families. Media outlets hosted debates with psychologists and lawyers, one expert arguing that life sentences for children eroded hope for growth, while another countered that leniency could undermine deterrence, citing studies on recidivism rates among those with callous traits. Alex's mother appeared in a rare interview, her plea for mercy heartfelt, describing her son as a boy who once built forts and shared snacks, now lost in a system that might crush his spirit before it could mend. The victim's relatives responded with measured grace, Rosa emphasizing in a statement how the debate must center on healing, not forgetting the deliberate choices that silenced Maria's laughter, Diego's ambitions, and Elena's gentle guidance. This public back and forth amplified the tension, rage resurfacing in petitions for harsh terms, while calls for compassion gathered signatures, creating a societal mirror to the legal wrangling that promised to influence the judge's final call. In pre-sentencing hearings, the debate took tangible form, witnesses called to illuminate paths forward or caution against them. A probation officer testified on Alex's behavior in detention, noting his compliance but persistent emotional flatness, suggesting structured programs could foster empathy over time, a point the defense seized to advocate for juvenile facilities despite the adult transfer. Prosecutors rebutted with a corrections expert who outlined the risks of early release for those showing limited remorse, referencing data on similar cases where oversight prevented further harm. Alex sat through these sessions with a subdued air, his earlier arrogance softened into quiet observation, occasionally whispering to his lawyer as if piecing together the argument's puzzle. The judge listened intently, her questions probing, asking about success rates in youth programs versus adult monitoring, her demeanor a steady anchor amid the storm of opinions. Families attended faithfully, their presence a quiet reminder of the human stakes. Elena's father submitting a written statement via video, urging a sentence that honored life's value without descending into vengeance, his words evoking tears that blurred the line between justice and mercy. Legal precedents loomed large in the discussions, attorneys citing landmark cases like those involving other young offenders, where sentences varied from rehabilitation to life terms, each example a thread in the tapestry of debate. Defense counsel highlighted rulings emphasizing brain plasticity, arguing Alex's youth offered a window for change that a lengthy sentence might close forever, supported by affidavits from child advocates who warned of the psychological toll of adult prisons on developing minds. Prosecutors pointed to statutes allowing discretion in severe instances, stressing the community's need for assurance, their briefs laced with references to the deliberate intent evident in digital trails and calm aftermath. This exchange of motions and counter-motions stretched over days, the courtroom a forum where law met morality, each argument building toward the sentencing date like steps up a scaffold. Alex's psychological team provided updated assessments, noting subtle shifts in his engagement during sessions, hints of reflection that the defense framed as seeds of remorse, while prosecutors saw them as too faint to outweigh the harm inflicted. The air thickened with anticipation, debates spilling into coffee shops and living rooms, where neighbors weighed their own children's futures against the shadow of what had happened. Would you advocate for a sentence rooted in hope for reform, or one that prioritizes protection from unaddressed risks? The question pulsed through the community, stirring emotions that blended rage at the untouchable past with a curiosity about possible futures. Families of the victims navigated this terrain with grace, participating in restorative justice circles that explored healing without erasing accountability, their input shaping impact statements readied for the bench. Alex, in quieter moments, asked guards about the process ahead, his questions revealing a boy grappling with consequences in ways his earlier demeanor had masked. Legal teams finalized their pleas, the prosecution seeking life with parole after 30 years, the defense pushing for a hybrid term allowing eventual juvenile oversight. On national organizations weighed in, amicus briefs flooding the court, turning the debate into a microcosm of America's wrestling with juvenile justice reform. The judge reviewed it all in chambers, her decision looming as a historic pivot, informed by the chorus of voices that had transformed personal tragedy into public discourse. As the sentencing date neared, tension coiled like a spring, the courtroom prepared for its final act, debates having illuminated every angle from mercy's light to justice's shadow. Community vigils adapted, incorporating messages of balanced reckoning, candles flickering with a resolve that honored all sides of the human equation. This phase not only debated terms, but evoked deeper reflections on society's role in shaping and correcting young paths, blending emotional spikes with the steady march toward resolution. Prosecutors and defense alike braced for the outcome, and knowing it would echo far beyond Dayton's borders, a testament to law's capacity to adapt amid unyielding pain. The courtroom tensed, ready for the judge's words, the debate's fervor now distilled into anticipation's quiet hum. The courtroom tensed, ready for the judge's words, the debate's fervor now distilled into anticipation's quiet hum, as the day of sentencing dawned with a gravity that drew crowds and cameras alike to the Dayton halls of justice. The judge entered slowly, her robes a symbol of measured authority, taking her seat amid a silence so profound it seemed to swallow every breath. She removed her glasses briefly, polishing them with care, before addressing the room, her voice steady and resonant, acknowledging the historic weight of the moment. "Age does not erase accountability," she began, her words cutting through the air like a clarion call, emphasizing how Alex's deliberate choices had forever altered the fabric of a community and 3 families. She recounted the evidence's clarity, the digital trails of curiosity turned to planning, the calm sequence captured on tape, the psychological profiles revealing awareness without remorse, painting a picture where youth's shield could not fully protect against the harm inflicted. Prosecutors sat poised, their arguments for a substantial term echoed in her summary, while defense counsel leaned forward, hoping for leniency's grace. Alex, seated small at the table, met her gaze for the first time without deflection, his untouchable air softened into a quiet attentiveness that marked the boy beneath the facade. Families filled the front rows, holding symbols of their loved ones, a model plane for Diego, a recipe book for Maria, a teacher's notebook for Elena. Their presence a silent chorus urging resolution that honored the light now dimmed. The judge spoke slowly, her remarks a tapestry woven from law, empathy, and the case's unique edges. Now imposing a sentence of life with parole eligibility after 30 years, the youngest in Ohio's history to receive such an adult term, a ruling that balanced severity with the possibility of future review. She cited the premeditated intent evident in every forensic link, the community's need for safeguarding, and the irreversible ripple of loss that demanded more than fleeting consequence. Yet she nodded to Alex's age, mandating evaluations and programs within the system to foster growth. Gasps filled the room, followed by sobs of relief from the victim's relatives, Rosa embracing Elena's father as tears flowed, a release that blended justice's satisfaction with the enduring ache of absence. Alex's expression hardened briefly, then finally broke, his lips trembling as the reality settled, the arrogance that once defined him yielding to a vulnerability that humanized the moment. A boy glimpsing the long shadow of his actions. His mother reached out instinctively, and her hand stopped by protocol, whispering words of love amid her own quiet weeping, the scene a poignant clash of accountability and familial bond. Media outside captured the historic pronouncement, analysts hailing it as a benchmark that navigated youth complexities without forsaking protection, sparking nationwide reflections on where mercy meets necessity in the face of profound harm. She acknowledged the sentence's gravity, for emphasizing how childhood's explanations could inform but not excuse the choices that led here, Her words a poetic justice that echoed through the chamber. "We sentence not in anger, but in commitment to healing and safety," she intoned, directing resources toward Alex's development while ensuring the term reflected the scale of the loss. The defense nodded solemnly, already planning appeals that would test the ruling's edges, while prosecutors exchanged glances of quiet affirmation. Their pursuit of balance affirmed. Jurors, present as observers, wiped tears, their earlier deliberations now validated in this historic frame, a reminder of duty's weight in bridging law and life. The families stood slowly, their embraces a testament to resilience, whispering thanks to one another for enduring the path that led to this point. The sentence, a step toward reclaiming peace amid the void. Alex was led away, his steps measured. Glancing back once at the empty stand where voices had painted his story's human cost, the untouchable boy now touched by consequence's hand. Community leaders outside praised the decision's thoughtfulness, vigils adapting to include messages of hope for all involved, candles glowing as symbols of light persisting through darkness. This ruling made history not just in records, but in hearts, a justice spike that transformed rage into relief. The judge's careful balance, offering closure's promise without illusion. Scholars would cite it in texts, debating its implications for years, while the neighborhood began to mend, scholarships and programs blooming in the victims' names as legacies of kindness overshadow. Alex's journey ahead loomed long, a path of reflection within structured walls, his earlier detachment perhaps evolving into understanding under time's gentle press. Families left the courthouse with heads high, the sentence a validation of their steadfast pursuit, even as they carried the quiet sorrow of what could never be restored. Would you see this as history's fair mark, or a call for even broader change in how we view young paths gone astray? The question lingered in discussions, blending satisfaction with ongoing curiosity about justice's evolving form. The courtroom, now emptying, held the echo of her words, a historic pivot that honored the past while eyeing futures yet unwritten. The judge's gavel fell, its sound a final punctuation on the day's decree, sealing a chapter that would resonate through time. In the aftermath, appeals were filed immediately, the legal machinery churning onward, but for the families, a measure of peace settled like dawn after a long night. Scholarships in Diego's name funding dreams of flight for other young hopefuls. The neighborhood held its annual vigil with renewed purpose, gathering under starlit skies to remember Maria's warmth, and Diego's spirit and Elena's grace, their stories woven into the community's fabric as beacons against despair. Legal experts continued to debate juvenile culpability, the case a touchstone in classrooms and courtrooms, prompting reforms that balanced protection with potential. Was justice served, or was it merely a layer in a tragedy stacked upon itself? The question invited reflection as the world moved forward, the historic sentence a reminder that accountability arrives not in fury, but in the steady hand of law. Alex, in his new routine, thought he had been untouchable, but the system's reach had proven otherwise, offering a chance for growth amid the consequences. The courtroom doors closed, the echoes fading, but the story's moral lingered, a tale of loss, reckoning, and the fragile hope for better tomorrows. The courtroom emptied, the door closed, and for the first time, he looked small.